There we go.
Hello, Sven. How's it going?
Hello, David. I'm well, thanks, and you?
Excellent, man. Doing well, thank you.
I'm a few minutes late. Sorry about that.
We were waiting just for you. Now we can start.
Oh, how amazing is that?
So, good afternoon and welcome everybody to April's edition of Josie Pug and Cape Town Pug. Just as a quick intro, for those who don't know me, I'm Jonathan Hart, and I'm going to be taking you through the news and agenda items. Just one thing to note, the session is being recorded, and then we do take all of these sessions and we upload them onto our YouTube channel. So if you do need to drop off or you missed out on some previous content, go to the channel. There's a lot of great info shared on there. Okay. Just make sure you are staying on mute during the course of the day, as the background noise can cause interruptions to the rest of the people on the call. That being said, if you have a question, come off mute and ask rather than leaving it for later or anything. I don't think anyone minds being interrupted, and we've got a nice session for today, so you can take it easy. So just the agenda, just covering what's in the news, some new things that are coming out. Then David and Michael are going to take us through Power Automate Desktop. As we mentioned last week, it is included now with Windows 10. So they're going to show you some tips and tricks and some good things to utilize it for, some things to look out for. So that will be worthwhile. And then we'll close off with some general questions. Now, before we get started, are there any questions from anyone? Sorry, Johan, I'm just muting you. I'm getting a lot of background noise from your side. Okay, perfect. So let's just do this quickly. So some of the news items, it was the BizApps launch event last week, where they talked about release wave 1. What's great about the new events is you can go in, even register now, and you can get access to all the on-demand content. So just go to that URL, BizApps launch event. It's just going to ask you to register. Once you've registered, you can watch all the items that they talked about during that event. There's a lot of great announcements coming in there. And you'll also get a view of everything that's coming over the next couple of months. Release Wave 1 speaks for between April and September this year. So you'll get to know all the things that are coming out. So check it out. The next one that's also really quite cool is mixed reality components are now generally available, which means now it's fully supported. Check it out, start playing around with it. If you haven't played around with mixed reality and you just want to see how to do some things, Karika on the call actually did a great session for us in June last year, and that is on the YouTube channel. So go in, check that out. You'll see what she was able to do with it. There are some great things that people are doing with mixed reality at the moment, and we're seeing this become very popular. So check it out, see how you can start utilizing it in your apps. Next one I came across was we now have a print function within Power Apps. Now, this is going to give you the ability to use your browser's functionality to print documents or items within a Power App. We've even added 2 new screen templates, which are an A4 size reference. So if you do need to print to an A4, you can use those screen templates and then populate them with info and then run that print function on there. And then, of course, if you are printing from your browser, you can print to an actual printer, or you can even print to PDF. So this has been something that's been requested for a while, and it's now finally available. So this is really cool. Yeah, so there's just those print templates that they've added in there as well. Another thing that's been added is you can now bring in a custom domain to Power Apps portals. This wasn't possible in the past, but now you do have the ability to go and use your own domain names for Power App portals. There are some things and hoops you have to jump through for the certificate. So you do need a publicly signed certificate, and it needs to be in a PEX format. There is a nice guide online. If you go to the documentation site, I will share it afterwards, which takes you through firstly creating that custom domain name for the portal, and then also how to go about importing that certificate file from your certificate provider. It can't be an internal cert. It does need to be a publicly signed cert, and it does need to be in, I think it's PEX format. And then there is another blog guide that shows you how to just convert your normal PFX files into the PEX files for that to work correctly. So check that out. Another one that has come through is they've made changes to the formula bar at last. Now, these have been in the experimental features for a while now. We are going to be decommissioning that experimental feature, but you should start seeing this new formula bar in your apps already. Sorry, I just had a frog in my throat. So the one thing, Enter key now adds a new line. In the past, you would have to go Shift Enter, and that would take you to the next line. Now, just hitting the Enter key takes you to the next line. You can still use the Shift Enter, and we've also added in Alt Enter. So the same way Excel lets you move between lines, we have brought that into there as well. So for those of you who are used to building out formulas and that in Excel, it just comes a bit easier now as well. The one other portion, say for example, you were busy at the beginning of a line and you wanted to add a tab space, what it would usually do is auto-complete that for you instead of adding the tab, which was quite a pain. Now, the IntelliSense in that is still there. You just need to start typing out the first couple of characters for it to push in, but it's no longer just going to drop in the first command if it's you're pushing the tab on its own. And there is also a scroll bar on the side just to make it a bit easier. And as I said, the experimental one is being decommissioned and it is going to be removed soon. So turn that off. You can just use the normal bar at the moment. Another great thing on the Dataverse in Teams. So we've extended the support on it. Now, when we first launched, you could have up to 500 environments in your organization. We've expanded this out drastically. You can now have up to 10,000 environments in a single tenant, which could mean that you could store about 1 billion rows across all of these environments. There's also been a lot of work done to make sure that these are available. We can officially announce now that it is available in South Africa. There were a couple of places that wasn't. It was South Africa, it was Switzerland, UAE, and a couple. We have now launched in those 3 areas and it's official. So you can start playing around with it inside of your tenants, start building out these solutions. You're going to see a lot of great things there. We've also made some changes to make it very easy for you to be able to do an essential in-place upgrade. So if you've built out something within Teams and you're starting to reach the max capabilities of it within Teams, you can take that database and convert it to an actual production environment. So that is really nice. There's a lot of work being done to make that as seamless as possible. The last one that I want to touch on is there have been some key improvements to the application lifecycle management process on Power Apps. One thing that I can call out is Canvas apps that trigger flows. You don't need to go in and edit that app to reestablish that connection to that flow anymore. So once you deploy it, once it's pushed out, it is going to be working from the get-go. You don't need to go in, edit it, make sure that everything's connected fine, and then only push it out and publish it from there. There's also other changes around the managed properties on it. Apps and flows now also support automated deployments via service principals. Now, just the one thing, if you are deploying with service principals, system administrators might not see all the Canvas apps and flows within an environment within that app maker experience. They must be shared with the admin before they can see them in that one. But admins do have the permission to go and share them and co-owner the apps themselves through the Power Platform Admin Center. So these are not being blocked on purpose. They are just working on addressing all the requirements for this to make it available for those admins who are used to working within the Dataverse or in Dynamics backgrounds. So there is some work to streamline this still, but it will be coming through. You can also now deactivate model-driven apps, which means end users won't see them in the My Apps list anymore. And there are a couple of other items coming in here, so check it out. There is also asynchronous support for solution exports, including GitHub Actions as well. So you can see that integration with GitHub is getting tighter and tighter as we go. And those were the main ones that I picked up over the last couple of days, well, over the last month. I just want to check in and see, is there anything else that anyone has maybe picked up that they would like to raise? Any new news items or things you may have come across that you found interesting? Okay, perfect. So with that, David, Michael, over to you to take us through some Power Automate Desktop.
Thank you, Jonathan. And yes, so that print function is huge. I mean, that's an absolute game changer. And it's funny because today we're going to be looking at RPA, or who remembers about a year ago we did a demo on UI flows in order to get printing to work, or somehow, or a little, in some form of hack to get printing to work. Where now we actually don't need to do that anymore. So that's very exciting. It's I think it's a game changer for many apps. Right, so RPA, or Power Automate Desktop. It's now free with Windows 10, and I think that's going to be a game changer for Power Automate, because now the barrier to entry for a lot of users are just so much lower, and people can start jumping in and start automation on their desktop without requiring any additional licensing or anything like that. So I think it's also easier to do, and it's easier, smaller bite-sized chunks to bite off. So I think this is going to be great for the product as a whole. Right, so let me share my screen and take you through some stuff. Yes, you do need Windows 10, but so I actually don't know if many people are not on Windows 10. But yeah, so you do need Windows 10 and you can get access to all of those goodies. Right, so let me share my screen and then we can get cracking with a quick introduction into how to build a flow or a desktop process. And then Michael is going to show you a little bit of more hardcore stuff and what you can do with integrating with the AI and all of these wonderful things. So I think, first of all, it's important to understand why you would typically use Power Automate Desktop or RPA. And I think the first example would just simply be that it's for systems that you want to talk to that don't have APIs. So a lot of the legacy systems don't have application programming interfaces, so you can't talk to them through Power Automate or through APIs or anything like that. So you actually need some sort of recorder or a macro recorder, which is basically what this is, to interact with it and to enter data into it or to extract data out of it. You then have other reasons as well. So it might be that you're not familiar with APIs, or you're not familiar with cloud flows in Power Automate. And it might be that you just want to automate a very simple process on your desktop, but it's something that takes you a very long time, very often, and you would rather drink coffee than sit and click around on spreadsheets and these sort of things to extract information into reports. And you could then typically use Power Automate Desktop for that robotic process automation. Right, so let me share my screen and then we can get cracking. Okay. Can everybody see my screen? Bit of a technical glitch there. Can everybody
Yes.
see it now?
Yeah,
Right,
it's up.
perfect.
You're on the Power Automate desktop
Yes.
webpage.
Right, so if you go to flow.microsoft.com/desktop, it'll take you through to the screen or this page. And from here, you can go and download the actual application that you need to install on your machine. You can go and read the blog, which is actually quite useful. Gives you a little bit of more background as to what this is intended to do and how to use it and how to get started. And then also, if you scroll down on the Microsoft.com/desktop page or site, right at the bottom, you'll see that you can get access to a ebook, which is also quite cool. If you click on this, it'll take you through some examples of when you would want to use this and so on and so forth. You do have to register. So I suspect Microsoft is going to spam you with some marketing email after you do. But after you've registered, you can get access to this document that'll take you through some nice examples and so on. So go and check that out. Right, to install the desktop client is actually very simple, and it's also important to note that there are two kinds of automation that you can do. So the one is attended, and that means that you physically need to be in front of the PC when you're doing it. So it's basically you can't run it automatically on a schedule without you being logged into your computer. And that's the one that is essentially then included in Windows 10. The moment you want to schedule this or have an unattended flow, then you still need the additional licensing from Power Automate. Right, so to install it, you can go and download it for free. It's a very simple install. And after you've done that, you'll see you can go and launch it by clicking on Start Run, clicking on Power Automate Desktop, or in your task menu. This is not a second screen, so it's not showing me here. But there's a little icon, a little blue icon that you can double click on that'll actually launch this screen. Right, so this is your, your studio client. It's important to understand that this is not a desktop version of Power Automate. It's not, you haven't just downloaded the whole Power Automate service onto your machine and now you can execute all of these things. It's not that, it's not a studio for Power Automate either. The remote or the Power Automate desktop is only used for robotic process automation. So if you want to do anything else in Power Automate, you would still go to flow.microsoft.com. Right, so I've got a few tests here. Here's the actual test print demo that we did in the UI flows last year. So if you did some stuff on UI flows, those would be automatically available in the Power Automate desktop as well, which is quite cool. And what we're going to do now is actually create a brand new flow. Any questions so far? Any questions as to what this is? And what we're busy looking at. Right, so what are we going to do now is automate a process of extracting information from a web browser or a website. And this could be the weather, it could be exchange rates, which we're going to look at now. You could randomly do speed tests and log the request, log the actual test results. So these are all just fun things that you could do with this. And for this example, we're going to be getting the exchange rate and then logging it into an Excel spreadsheet and then emailing that to our boss because that's what our boss told us he or her wants us to do. So we don't argue, and that's instead of directing them to Google or Bing to go and find the information themselves, we are good employees and we're not going to capture this data and email it to him or her on a daily basis. Right, so while this is loading, we're essentially going to be using a web flow or a web process. You'll see that you get web recorders and desktop recorders, and these work a little bit differently, and Michael is going to take us into quite a deep dive on the desktop recorder, where I'm going to be covering a bit of web and then a bit of desktop. So to start off with, we need to go and find the actual exchange rate. So we want to know what is the exchange rate today. So we're going to go and launch the web recorder. It's going to ask us what browser we want to use. And that is very important for this process because the Power Automate desktop extension has to be installed in the browser in order for it to be automated and in order for it to be recorded. So I've installed it on Edge and Chrome. I have found that Edge works quite well, so I'm actually going to choose that for this demo. Right, and let's go to, and we're going to search for USD to ZAR. Right, so the moment that this now launched, this Edge browser launched, it created this little web recorder window over here, which tells me that it recorded the fact that I went to Bing and I went to this URL. So as I navigate around the web, this will actually record those URLs, and then when I start recording, it's going to action those actions on the last screen that I ended up on. So for now, I'm going to just go and say start recording. And you'll see that everything I hover over now turns into these red blocks. And this is getting stuck there. I'm not sure why. Shouldn't do that. Let me just say. Okay, that didn't have. Let's go and start recording. All right, there we go. So when I right click on this one now, it'll give me a few options. So I can go and say extract the value from this, go and extract the title of this block, and go and check whether it exists and return a Boolean for true or false. You can also tell the recorder to wait until this specific element appears on the screen. So it might be that certain things need to run on the page, and you might need to enter some data before something is displayed, and you can tell it to actually pause and wait the flow until this happens. Right, you can take a screenshot of this element and so on and so forth. So what we're going to do for this is we're just going to extract that value, and you'll see that it's writing this into a variable called inner text. So we'll change this later on. We don't want, inner text doesn't necessarily tell us much, especially if there are multiple things that we want to do or multiple pieces of information we want to capture on the web page. So if I now click on finish, you'll see that it shows me the desktop, and it shows me that it launched Edge, and there it got the details of that element. So if I double click on this, you'll see over there, I can actually double click on that, and you'll see that it assigns it to a variable called percentage inner text. So we want to go and change this to exchange rate. On the right-hand side, you'll see all of the variables which the system now started allocating. And the one is the browser. So the actual browser session that it launched, it allocated into a variable. Then I also have the exchange rate, which it will now capture from that website. And then it'll actually write, as you run through these flows, it'll show you the values for these, which is quite nice during troubleshooting as well. Right, so at this stage, I'm going to just show you a little bit more on the navigation. So on the left-hand side, you've got hundreds of actions that you can perform, and it's really an extensive list, and it's really a powerful list. So in here, you can do conditional functions, you can do loops, you can trigger wait, certain periods for the function to wait. You can go and directly call the web or any other automation action. So you'll see during my recording, it automatically built all of these actions in this canvas over here, where you can also manually go and select these actions from this pane on the left, drag them to the canvas, give them a property or complete the properties, and then you will be able to use them as well. So that's what we're going to be doing now. So I'm going to go and look for Excel, because now I want to write this into Excel. First thing I want to do is launch Excel, and I don't want to use a blank document. I want to open it up with a specific document, and I've got one on my desktop that I'm just going to use. So it's the currency stats. If it's got a password, you can go and specify the password and these sort of things. So let's save that. Next, we want to go and find the first available row in Excel. So if I drag that on the screen, you'll see that it automatically picks up that there's an Excel instance variable that is already set by the previous launch Excel action. And this is how it knows which Excel instance to take action on. It's going to take the first variable, sorry, the first available row, and now we want to write to Excel. So we're not going to say write to Excel. The instance again is the Excel instance. The variable to, or the value to write is going to be the exchange rate, which is over there. And if you click on the little drop down, you can also perform certain functions. So you can upper, lower, trim, and all of these sort of things on that value, which is quite awesome. So for now, we're just going to do that value. Then the specified cell that we're going to be writing on, we're going to be writing on column A, and the row that we're going to be writing on is the first free row, which it got from the previous action. And then
you do have exchange rate twice, eh? It pasted it in twice. You do have exchange rate variable listed twice there.
Okay, that's not good. That won't work. Thank you.
No problem.
So I must actually get you to watch some of my other work. I might actually save some time on debugging. Right, so this is write to Excel, and then after that, we're actually going to go and save that Excel sheet. So the Excel instance, we're going to save that. And then after that, we're just going to go ahead and close it. Okay, after that, we can go and launch Outlook. So there's an Outlook function. So we're going to launch Outlook. It's going to launch it into an Outlook instance, which is fine. Then we want to send an email. So send an email message through Outlook, drag that on the screen. It's going to use that Outlook instance. It needs to use my account. And then it's going to send an email to myself as well. Subject is, here you go, Mr. Bossman. And then over here, you can also go and add that attachment. So we're now going to go and specify that attachment that we worked with previously. So there's the currency stats, save that function, and then that should essentially give us what we need. So in theory, let's go and run this and see what happens. So you'll see there it's launching Bing. It's getting to the right site. It's now copied that value. It's launching Excel. It's written that value into Excel. It's opening up my email, and it is sending an email. Right, so it's sending message 1 of 1. And if I take a minute, it should show me the message that it's sent. There you go. So there's the email with the attachment. And if I open it up, it's got some of the previous day's stats. And then also then this 15, which was rounded off. It's actually a 14.59. So Excel is just rounding it off. So essentially, that's a very quick demo of how you build these flows. Hugely powerful. Think of it as a macro that actually spans applications. So you can actually record actions and functions between various applications, including legacy, which I think is going to be a big use case for this. So I'm about to hand over to Michael to show us some more cool stuff. Is there anybody with any questions at this stage? All right, cool. So Michael, I'm going to hand over to you to show us some of the more advanced stuff.
Cool. Thanks, dude. Let's see what background do I have on today. Oh, it's my standard background. Okay, let's share my desktop. Let's try this one. Okay, you can hear me loud and clear?
Yep, all good. And your desktop's up.
Okay, cool beans. So thanks, David. I think there's a few things maybe I can actually just quickly ask you. One of the things that you did there was you launched Outlook and you got it to send an email. Yet we know already in Power Automate in the cloud flows, so this is a desktop flow, it's automated the desktop. So cloud flows, which kind of happen in the cloud, the flows that we've been creating for many years, there's a send mail action. So when should I choose between the two?
So, Michael, I think that as a rule, as if you know how to use the cloud flows, and if the system which you're integrating with, which like Outlook obviously does, support cloud flows, then that'll be the first priority. I think that it's the first preference. What I just showed you now, I think would typically be for somebody that doesn't necessarily know how to use cloud flows or feel intimidated by that interface, or it's still very new to it. But they know how to actually use their desktop, and they can use the desktop recorder to just simulate those repetitive tasks. So I saw there's a comment of PowerShell in the chat. Yeah, this is definitely not for people who know how to use PowerShell either.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Yeah, so just to be clear for everyone, what I was asking is traditionally you've gone into Power Automate and we've had something called cloud flows, right? And you've gone here and you've created a new flow that's either, based on a trigger or on a schedule, or you manually kind of start it. But what David showed you now was essentially a desktop flow. So you go into desktop flows, and literally if you create a new desktop flow from here and you click new, it will literally launch Power Automate Desktop, which is what he showed you. Alternatively, you can launch Power Automate Desktop first and just come here and create a new flow to automate your desktop. And so I wanted to show you how you create a desktop flow, which actually, David, you already did by automating Excel. The scenario that I want to show you is actually one that we use for what we call RPA in a day. So you build this over a course of several hours. It's a hands-on lab that essentially anyone can go and do. And it's a full end-to-end process combining a cloud flow and a desktop flow. So a cloud flow starts off by finding that an email arrives in a mailbox and it triggers. And in that mail is an invoice, and it extracts that invoice. It then does, I'm going to call it OCR on the contents of that invoice to extract the values from that invoice. And then it takes those values and it does something with them. Actually, let me just quickly show you this because it's probably easier to talk through if I show it this way. So here is the cloud flow. So when a new email arrives, in my mailbox, and it's got the subject of new invoice, then go and do this to every attachment that it's found inside of that email. And on that attachment, use an AI model that I created with AI Builder called the Contoso Invoices model, and pass that document to that model and then extract the values out of that invoice. So out of that invoice, it's going to get a bill value, a contact, who's the contact, the date, and the total value of the invoice. It's going to send an email back to the person who sent the invoice saying, thanks, we received your invoice with the following details. It's then going to go and send the invoice essentially for approval via Teams. So someone's going to receive the approval in Teams to say, hey, we got this new invoice. Would you like to approve it? And if it's approved, so let's go down here. If it's approved, yes, then the cloud flow is actually going to start the desktop flow. And so why is that? Why is the cloud flow starting a desktop flow, now automating the desktop? And that's because the invoicing application that sits on the desktop has no API. It's a legacy old Visual Basic app, or maybe it's a green screen app, or maybe it's a SAP GUI, or something like that. So we're going to automate it through this mechanism rather than an API into the invoicing database, because it just doesn't exist, let's say. And so what it's going to go and do is it's going to go and run a desktop flow called enter an invoice. And if I jump here, here's the desktop flow called enter an invoice. So it's going to launch that, and it's going to pass into it 3 variables: the amount, the contact email address, and the account name. And then something's going to happen, right? We don't know yet what the desktop flow does, but something cool will happen. It's passing in these parameters, and then it's going to do something. And then once that's done, it's going to send an approval email to say, hey, your invoice was approved and processed. It's in the invoicing tool now. So that's essentially like combining a cloud flow and a desktop flow. So let me just jump into this desktop flow to show you what this looks like. So let me jump into here, enter an invoice. I'm just going to go and edit it. Actually, maybe just before I edit it, let me just create a new dummy one. I just want to show you something quick. Yeah, let's do this. I'll just create a dummy desktop flow just to show you the desktop recorder, which David didn't show you earlier.
Michael, while you're setting that up, I'm assuming your machine needs to be running and connected when you call that flow then.
Aha, yes, that's a jolly good question. The question is, how does the Cloudflow even call the desktop for the desktop to start this little app and start doing stuff? So yes, your PC needs to be connected to the internet. And actually what you install on your PC is a data gateway, the Power Platform data gateway. So you install that on your PC, and that's how the cloud calls into your PC and then fires up the desktop flow and gets it working. Correct. Yeah. Okay, so just before I show you the actual flow that does all the work, I just want to show you kind of more or less how you create it. So yes, you can manually go and drag and drop your controls on the left-hand side, or your actions, should I say, your actions from the action pane into your designer in the middle. Or you can go and record it and then edit it, or a combination, however you feel you want to do that. Just a couple of notes that are like some personal kind of stuff I noted when I started looking at some of the actions that you get on the left-hand side. It's almost becoming like this is a development tool, but you don't have to write code. I mean, literally, you can do stuff like convert stuff to JSON, from JSON to other things, merge lists, increment variables, loops, if statements, and you don't write code. It's all kind of drag and drop and configuration, and that's essentially what you're doing, whether you're doing it manually or whether you're doing a recorder. From here, you can even call PowerShell scripts or Python scripts, VB scripts, etc. So it's got datetime functions, text functions, getting stuff from the clipboard. These are all the actions that you get here. But anyway, so let me start off just by doing the desktop recorder. So earlier on, you saw the web recorder. So if I do the desktop recorder, once again, here the recorder starts, it launches. I haven't started recording yet. And the one that we always demo, just as a basic understanding, is the Microsoft calculator, right? So as soon as I hit start recording, it's now recording any interactions with the desktop, whether it's keystrokes, mouse movements, mouse clicks, shortcut keys, whatever it might be. And once again, as you hover over elements, you get the red box, and then you know you're in the right element. So if I select in here now, you'll see in the left-hand side in the recorder, it clicked. There was something that got clicked. And then I can put in a number 4, and it sent a keystroke of 4. And then I can click plus, and I can say 3, and then I can say equals. Then I can select in here, Control C, and it copied. So here's my different actions. And from here, even I can delete them, if I don't like what it's done. But let's just assume I'm done. I'm just going to hit finish. And so now here are the steps that it's recorded. And you'll see, for example, the second step here is a waiting of 2 seconds. And maybe I don't want to wait, so I can just select these radio buttons here and I can disable this or delete it. You know, disable basically means it's temporarily gone. I can always re-enable it later on. The other thing that's cool is if you think of it from a coding perspective, think of each of these numbers as a line in code, and you can even put breakpoints on them. So you can come in here and put a breakpoint, hit run, and then it'll run to that breakpoint, and then you can see what the variable values are at that point, stop it, etc. You can also do stuff like, you know, what happens when something fails. So for example, maybe here it was supposed to send the key 4 to the screen, but it failed. So if I select on this and just edit this step, you'll see at the bottom here there's something called on error. And so on error, you can determine what to do if that specific line fails. Either just continue running or throw an error and just stop. So just stop the whole process. There's no point carrying on. Or, you know, only do this if a certain reason why it failed, right? So you can go and get quite specific depending on what the action is as to what you want to do. So it couldn't send a keystroke. So in this scenario here, I want to set a variable and carry on running, or run another flow to log an event or call someone, you know, or whatever it might be. So you can get quite sophisticated in terms of how you want to handle errors. You can even just tell it just to keep retrying it. So retry it again when it fails. You know, pause a bit, but then carry on. So you'll see when you get to a specific action and you select it, you edit it, then you'll get, you know, different parameters and properties. You saw David showed, like, if I was dealing with an Excel file, maybe it's password protected, so you could send in a password. The same for PDF files and zip files. There's an option here to extract zip files and open up PDF files and take images out of them, and they might be password protected, so then you'll get a password protection option here to unprotect it. So yeah, so there's just some interesting stuff here. Just also on the right hand side, by the way, this variables window, here I can see the input variables for the entire flow. So I've just recorded this, so there's no input variables for this flow, but I can create some. There's also no flow variables yet, but I can go and define some variables that I might want to use, set in one step, use in another. But as I go down here, it's also pretty cool because what it's done, and this is unique to desktop flows, is as it's gone around the UI, essentially it's captured UI elements that I interacted with. So you'll see it interacted with 3 different elements. The one is that text box, not really a text box, but you know, where the numbers go in the calculator. There it is, and it actually called this UI element, it gave it the name text display is 0. And you'll see over here, right at the beginning, we clicked there, but we also clicked there later on when we wanted to copy the result. And I can literally go here and say, well, I don't like the name of that. Let's call this text box as an example. And you'll see it's now changed within my desktop flow. And the plus button, maybe I don't like the name of that either. I can just call it plus button. And the same type of thing, I can literally come to the left-hand side here, find UI automation, and manually drag controls from the left-hand side to either get values from UI elements or post values to UI elements. Recording did this for me, so that's gone and set these things up. So I didn't have to go and drag and drop these things. Yeah, so if I run this thing now, it's going to run to the breakpoint. And now it's stopped over here. And then I can carry on running, and you'll see it literally will be stepping through in the background as it steps through the code. So I just wanted to kind of familiarize you a little bit more with this. And that was pretty cool. It started calculator for me, which is all very interesting. But this one's way more interesting. So this is the one I recorded earlier, and what it's doing is it's driving an invoicing desktop app, as I mentioned. Now, what you'll see with this one is there's several input variables, because remember, the cloud flow is going to call the desktop flow and pass it values from an invoice. So the desktop flow needs to accept some variables. So prior to this, I would have gone here and clicked plus and created an input variable, and I would have given the variable a name. For example, shipping address. Maybe I want the shipping address from the invoice or whatever it might be. And I can give it a default value if I want to. And I can give it an external name and click create. Ooh, let's just give it a description. And so you'll see now I've got a shipping address variable as well. And now I can use this variable within the application. So what this thing first does is it launches an application, which is the legacy invoicing app. It's then going to go and click some stuff on the screen. It's going to go and populate a text box with a value, so a date. It's then going to go and populate the account text box with the account name, so the customer essentially for this invoice, right? So if I go into this one, you'll see the text to put into that box is the variable which is being passed in. And if I run this thing without passing in a variable, it's got a default value of wingtip toys. And then it populates the contact, it populates the amount. And somewhere here it clicks the save button, which is this one here. This is where it actually goes and clicks the save button. So this is what it recorded for me. And then I just went and parameterized just the three things here to pass in values. And just to show you kind of like what this looks like without actually calling it from a Cloudflow, I'm going to click run. And obviously now I'm not driving, it's driving. So it's launching the Contoso invoicing application. It's going to invoices, it's putting in the date, the account, the contact, the amount. So those are all invoice default values for the variables. And then it saves the new invoice amount. Okay, pretty cool. So that was it running kind of in isolation. So let me close this thing now. Let's hit no. And what I'm going to do now is do the full end-to-end process. So I'm going to send myself an email, which is what I do often because I'm quite a boring guy with no friends. And in here is an invoice. Let's just open up this invoice so you can see what it looks like. So here is an invoice. It's billed to Litware. There's the contact A Dixon. The value is $6,743.12. And so that's what the invoice looks like. So let's send it to myself. Okay, so what should happen, let's just jump here and refresh the Cloudflow. You'll see my Cloudflow is running. If I go into the running instance, it would have received the mail. And what it should have done now is passed it through AI to extract the values right. So you can see the mail's arrived. It's now going into this section down here. It should have extracted the values and sent me a mail back. Just go to my inbox. Oh, that's not very nice. Okay, I'm having something wrong with my email. Doesn't actually matter.
Mark, I had the same issue this afternoon earlier with one of my demos. The exact same error happened to me. So I think there might be something fishy that's happening today.
Okay, cool. Well, we don't need email, right? Email's yesterday. But it did send a message to Teams to approve the invoice. So there's the value. The contact person is A Dixon. And now I can hit yes, I approve the invoice. Hit submit. And now once approved, remember it's now the cloud is going to call my desktop. And what I should have really done is just made sure my gateway was running, which I forgot to do. But I think it is running. It usually is just always running on my PC. I'm not touching anything, and now I'm just going to wait. And in a moment, my desktop flow should fire up and drive that Contoso invoice. Here we go. Okay, and once saved, then once again, it should have sent another email at the end of the whole process. Well, I'm not sure if it did, but yeah, this should refresh shortly. Okay, something happened. There we go. All my green ticks have now arrived. So it did do the starting of the desktop flow. You saw that it sent an email with the text, your invoice amount has been approved. Okay, so that's pretty cool, isn't it? Hey? Just a few other things to show you. When you do this, when you drive a desktop flow from the cloud, it also means you get to do analytics on desktop flows. So if I go to monitor, you'll see I can monitor cloud flows, which has always been there, but I can also monitor desktop flow runs. So you'll see that 1 minute ago, a desktop flow ran on someone's desktop, and I can open that up, and then I can see the steps that actually executed as part of that desktop flow. So I can see it ran an application and it did all this stuff. These are the steps that you saw when in the designer of the desktop flow, right? And for every one of them, you can also see what the input value was and what the output value was. So you can see here there was an input value of a date that was submitted to this specific step. I'm not sure there'll be an output value, no, because it was submitting it to a step. So you can start seeing exactly how flows are executing, if there's any errors, issues associated with those desktop flow runs. The other thing that's pretty cool, which unfortunately I haven't got set up and I just wanted to talk to you about, was this thing here called Process Advisor. Now, what Process Advisor is it allows multiple people to go and record a process that they do on their desktop. Maybe there's like 17 people in the call center, and the way that they open a support ticket, you want all 17 of them to record it. So they use the desktop recorder, they all record it. Then you upload all of those recordings into Process Advisor, and it analyzes what's similar and what's different to the way that the people do their process. So you can see, hey, 8 out of the 15 people use this way of creating a case, and the other people do this way of creating a case, and that way is much faster. And so now you've got a way to go back to people and say, hey, rather do it like this, it's much faster this way. So it's a way of literally analyzing how people use their desktop and their tools to do stuff, and then compare it with each other, see how, on average, how long does the process take, etc. So it's an analytical tool to analyze how people drive desktops and processes as part of that. I hope that kind of makes sense. David, anything else I'm missing here that I should quickly show?
I think it's not necessarily something to show. I think it's just maybe something you can talk through on what does this mean for multiplexing?
Oh, you're a funny guy.
Michael, I've got a question. Yeah. When you run the RPA, as it's not really influenced by you moving mouse around and click on anything else, right? So, for instance, if the application which you had open, if you click away from the application, will the RPA fail because of that?
It can, yes.
Okay.
It can
still.
Yeah, it depends what your RPA is doing. So, or your desktop flow is doing. So, especially you can see this one, it's literally driving UI elements on the screen, and it's literally it can mimic a key press on your keyboard. So if you go and suddenly click somewhere else, you can cause an issue, absolutely. But that's if you're using this UI automation, right? There's so many other actions that actually don't use UI automation, but is driving the desktop, if that kind of makes sense. So for example, let me just quickly go here and say, I want to loop through all the files in a folder. So let me just say, I want to get all files in a folder. Which folder, not put that one C code on. Let's just say temp, and I want all the PDF files in here. Start.pdf. Do I want them sorted? No, I don't want them sorted. Okay, so I'm getting all the files. It's going to put them in this variable called files. And then I'm going to go and do a for each loop because I want to loop through each file that it gets. And the variable I need to use here is files. And now for each item, I want to extract the images from the PDF file. So let's chuck it in there. Which PDF file? Well, this will be the variable called current items. Let's just do that. Okay, I didn't fill in all the values, but you'll see this thing here. It's getting files from a folder. It's looping through each file. It's extracting images from the PDF, then saving those images somewhere. That's not actually like driving my desktop. If I run that, I won't actually see anything happen. It's just API calls essentially in Windows doing that. So then I can carry on with something else if I'm doing this type of thing.
That's really awesome, yeah. So even if you run the flow on different resolutions, I know with some of the automation apps that look for X and Y axes and those type of things, it won't be affected by that.
Correct. Yeah. So lines 17 to 20 won't be affected by that. And but obviously there's not an action for everything you ever want to do, and so sometimes you have to drive the UI like the rest of it's doing, and then you can be affected by resolution, and you can be affected by if the app upgrades and buttons move in the app, right? Then you will be affected by that. Now you won't be affected by that like on the website, because the website, what it's actually doing is it's looking at ID elements in the HTML DOM, and so if elements moved around, it would still work as long as the element name stayed the same or the element ID value stayed the same. So it depends on the scenario as how one would be affected by that.
Thank you.
Sven, I see you've got your hand up. Do you have a question?
Yes, thank you. First of all, David and Michael, thank you. I thoroughly enjoyed your demo. I'm relatively new to Power Automate, so this was quite a big eye-opener for me. I'm just curious about the specific names. So David, you showed web recorder, and Michael, pretty much you showed desktop recorder. But I mean, are they to an extent the same? Because David, you started with going to a web page, and then you did log the answer in Excel and then send an Outlook message. Could that not have been a desktop recorder that's first step was go to the web and get something? So are they like the same, if that makes sense, or is there a subtle difference?
So because I interacted with the browser elements, you need to use the web recorder. The UI, the desktop recorder doesn't necessarily have access to those tags and the actual element names. So you could probably get it to launch the browser as a normal application. You can launch any application through the desktop actions as well. But because it's a web browser, the way that you interact with the data or the elements are a little bit different. So if you use a desktop recorder, you can probably launch a browser, but it won't be as accurate.
Got you. Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah, that's 100% correct. You can actually use the desktop recorder to record a web browser, but it's not recommended. If you're going to record web browser interactions, rather use the web recorder because it natively understands the HTML behind the page, which makes it more accurate. But saying that, you don't have to use the desktop recorder or the web recorder. I think when you become a master of this, which I'm certainly not, you just use the actions on the left-hand side and you drag and drop them in. But I think most users, because certainly this is also designed, I think one of the key points is you don't have to be a developer to do this, right? This is also designed for power users who just want to automate their life. And so certainly they're not going to start on the left-hand side with these actions. They're going to record something and then change it slightly. So if you're going to record anything other than the web, do desktop recorder. If you're going to record a web browser, then use web recorder. But you might end up actually with one desktop flow that uses both, like literally like David did. It drove a web browser and then it drove Excel. He just manually did Excel rather than recording it, but he could have recorded Excel rather. Yeah, the other thing to mention is flows can call subflows. So you can, like almost like in code, you can have functions that call functions, and you can create one desktop flow and have a reusable another desktop flow, and you can have one flow call another flow on the desktop, which is pretty cool. So you can have cloud flows calling desktop flows and desktop flows calling desktop flows. So you can get pretty complicated with this stuff.
Sven, I see your hands up. Do you have another question?
I raised again, so it wasn't my old hand, it's the new hand. May I ask about pricing? So, I mean, I'm aware that, there's a per user per month price, what's that, $15? Okay, so first of all, what you've shown us here, the desktop version, that's free if I've understood correctly. But if we want to get the non, what did you call it? The unattended version. Okay, so where it runs on a schedule and so on, then I presume you need, one of the pricing plans, and we've just got to try and understand which one.
Yeah, maybe can I draw something to help out? Let's see if this will work. Because you've asked the dreaded licensing questions that David usually asks. And so...
you don't usually try and answer my questions with drawings. I'm actually quite offended.
I'm sharing the wrong desktop again. Sorry, just give me 2 seconds. David, I don't draw for you. Don't be offended, but you're just not special enough. Okay, let's do it this way. So you get cloud flows, which are the stuff that has always been in Power Automate, used to be called Microsoft Flow. That's what I started off with. You've got all those actions, hey, mail arise in a mailbox. You want to call out to Azure Cognitive Services. You want to do AI Builder. You want to send approvals, send messages on Teams, all those types of things. But that essentially happens in the cloud. You're not driving a desktop. You need no desktop for it. You just need a web browser. So those are cloud flows. And then what we showed today was, well, mostly was desktop flows. In other words, you're driving something on a desktop like a legacy application that doesn't support APIs. And so one thing that Jonathan said at the beginning is on this machine, you install Power Automate Desktop, and you get an element of that which is free with Windows 10. So if you've got Windows 10, you can go and download Power Automate Desktop, and you can use it on Windows 10 today. But it's isolated to running on that desktop only. It's kind of like for personal productivity, if that makes sense. So I want to automate something I do every day. Like, I've got this website I go to every day to manage people that haven't paid bills, their levy for our homeowners association. And I don't have an API to that, but I need to find out who they are and I need to WhatsApp them. So I can just do that with Power Automate Desktop. But then you also get, I'm going to call it the paid version. And essentially what the paid version does is it allows kind of like this layer underneath both of these things which exist, which is around, I want to see auditing information. I want to see who's been doing what. I want cloud flows to integrate with desktop flows. I want Process Advisor. I want the cloud flow to start the desktop flow. And then the 2 versions of the paid that you mentioned is you get attended and you get unattended. And essentially what that means is attended means I need to be logged into the desktop in order for the Power Automate Desktop to drive the desktop. So attended means someone needs to be logged into the desktop. Unattended means nobody needs to be logged into the desktop. So you, for example, you can have a bank of virtual machines running in the cloud or on premises, doesn't matter. They can be locked, no one's logged in, and they're just doing stuff for you. They're automating things, you know, these robots are doing things. And so, yes, and I don't know what the pricing is. There's pricing on the public website, and there's also EA pricing and different pricing that you have depending on the size of your organization, etc. But there's different pricing for if you're doing attended versus unattended, if that makes sense. And then the other thing, just to point out as part of this diagram, which I just want to go back, is even in the cloud, there's kind of I'll call it the Power Automate that you get with Microsoft 365, which is standard connectors. And then you get Power Automate Premium, where you essentially get access to premium connectors. So I guess that kind of draws it all. So it all depends on the scenario of what you're trying to do as to what license you need. You know, if you only need to drive cloud stuff, then it's the left-hand side. If you need to drive desktop stuff, then that's the right-hand side. If you need to do both, then it's a combination of both.
Cool. Thank you. Well done on the spot. Nice.
Cool. Sorry, long explanation.
Did you draw that with your mouse?
No, with my finger.
Oh, okay. Well done.
With a pen, dude. Any other questions?
Mike, there is a question on how do I transfer a flow that I've built on the desktop version to a colleague?
You put it into a solution. So you can take desktop flows and they can be added into a solution. And then you can take that solution and you can move it around just like any other solution in the Power Platform. Move it between environments, however you want to do it. You can also share a desktop flow as well. Like you do cloud flows. And so when you start creating desktop flows, I'll just bring this down here. When I go to my flows, you'll see I've got desktop flows. Here's enter an invoice. You'll see I can share it.
Awesome.
Yeah, but if you physically want to move it around, then you put this into a solution. You know, solutions down here, left-hand side. In summary, it's kind of like a zip file, and then you can literally extract it and give it to someone else and deploy it into another environment.
So Michael, I can actually have a Power App that calls it a flow that runs a UI flow, get information back and populate that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or even a Power Virtual Agent. Might be another thing to look into.
Yeah. Yeah, a virtual agent which calls a cloud flow, which calls a desktop flow. Obviously, you got to be, you know, with stuff that expects a synchronous response, like a virtual agent, you don't want the person to hold the line for 4 hours. So, you know, you just got to worry about timing and how long the desktop flow will take to run. But, you know, theoretically, and technically, it's possible.
Awesome. Any other questions for Mike or David? Yeah, awesome. Thanks, guys. Appreciate that. I think that was really informative. Showed the guys a lot of what's possible. Really appreciate it.
Pleasure. And what I'll do is I'll just pop in the IAM window the URL to go and download RPA in a day. So you can literally
already done.
Oh, you've done it. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I did it earlier, so that they've got access to it. I also said for people who haven't seen the chat, just go check it out. You can download it. If you are interested in attending a workshop on it, let me know. I'll be happy to set up that if we get enough people interested. Okay.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I think it's a
So
great
with
idea.
that, yeah. Now, for those, I mean, the guides really nicely explained. You are able to work through it on your own, but just sometimes some people like to go through a course or a workshop with it. So let me know. We can then look at setting that up. Okay. But the guides do work really well. Okay, awesome.
Jonathan,
We're at the end. Yes.
Before we end, I don't know if there's any other general questions, comments around stuff people are working on that they need help with, or interesting learnings that anyone's got to share around anything on the Power Platform.
No, I think from Michael, I think I have a little bit of learnings is that that the product has evolved quite a lot in the recent time frame. And you know, if you've got any customers that were looking into RPA, let's say a year ago or even 6 months ago, they must really go and revisit our offering, because there's a lot of new and improved features and investments that came in. So that's the only learnings I've got, because I know that in some of my cases, the customers' requirements couldn't be met. But definitely, you know, we are on par, if not better, with others now. So, yeah, thanks.
100%. Thanks for raising that, Mona. Yeah, it definitely has improved compared to when I first started working with it. So it's a great point. Anything else from anyone? Okay, great. So with that, just want to thank everyone for their time today. Tian, I see you've got your hand up.
Sorry, just before you finish there, I saw an article earlier the week. I haven't played with it yet, but apparently they're releasing configurable connectors to SharePoint lists, which is a huge game changer, because that's deploying to another environment was always a headache to delete and recreate your connectors.
No, I haven't seen that, actually. Good thing to go and look into. Mike, have you seen anything around that?
I haven't.
Okay.
But it sounds cool. Sounds very cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Great custom. There we go.
I haven't heard anything about that either. Searching.
Yeah. Okay. No, cool. Thanks for raising that. It's definitely something interesting to look at.
Well, I'll post a link that I found to it.
Oh, awesome. Thanks. There is also now a line icon for Power Apps.
Oh, there's actually a whole bunch of new icons in Power Apps. I don't know if you guys seen that.
Yes.
That made me very excited.
Yeah, I actually noticed them today when I was busy running another workshop. I saw a whole bunch of new ones that they've added, which is quite cool. Okay. Awesome. So
and maybe just one more thing to share, Jonathan. I think you did share it last time, but it kind of reminded me while doing this invoice processing is that there's a preview feature where you can go and add a solution into your environment, and it gives you a full invoicing processing solution and a Power App included in that. So what it does is it does the AR Builder invoice processing model on an invoice. And then depending on the accuracy, so you can say, well, you know, if it's only 80% accurate or whatever it is, then a human can intervene, and there's a Power App, and it shows like the invoice on the left-hand side and the values on the right-hand side, and then you can approve and go to the next one, approve and go to the next one. So it's kind of like a pre-packaged scenario that you can go and enable. And literally, if you just go to AR Builder inside of make.powerapps.com, you'll actually see it there, and you can say, you know, test out, and it deploys the whole solution for you, which looks pretty cool as well. I haven't played too much with it, so I couldn't comment further than that, but it looks pretty good.
Right. Oh, it's good to know. Okay, great. Thanks, Michael. So if anyone has anything that they would like to present or like covered in this session, reach out to any one of us, Monet, Michael, David, myself, and we can we can see how we can slot you in. Please share what you guys are doing. It really helps the rest of the community. It helps us a lot as well. If there's things that you particularly want to see, don't hesitate to let us know. We want to make sure that we are bringing content that's really applicable to what you guys want, okay? So let us know. So with that, thanks everyone for your time. Hope you found this worthwhile. As usual, the videos, the recordings will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. So if you did miss anything, if you got late, go check it out. It will be uploaded by tomorrow afternoon, okay? So with that, thanks everyone. Have a great evening.
Thanks everybody.
Excellent.
Have a good
Thank
one.
you.
Thanks. Bye. Bye.
Thank you, everybody.